He's been a pioneer of the online learning and teaching approach and has overseen its introduction in a number of institutions across Ghana. Dr. Darkwa has been the recipient of a number of prestigious academic honors, including the Mary McLeod Bethune Award from the Black Honors and Awards Committee for Leadership, Service and Scholastic Achievement at the 21st Annual W.E.B. Du Bois Award Banquet. He also received the Washington University Graduate School of Arts and Sciences Fellowship. Dr. Darkwa is currently the president of the Ghana Technology University College, and also he's a chief, rides in palanquins at the Patriensa traditional area in the Asante Achim district. So ladies and gentlemen, your chief.
Well, thanks for the elaborate presentation and introduction. Good afternoon. My presentation is on the improved rural communications, and I know somehow it overlaps with some of the earlier presentations. But I'm approaching this from a very practical perspective. You know, some of us grew up in a rural environment, were born, bred, and battered in a rural environment. So most of these are actually based on my experience growing up in rural Ghana. Actually, I wish we all have one of these virtual reality, which will transport us directly to the rural environment so that we can relate direct. We don't have to travel there. We can be in this room and experience through virtual reality technology. And I hope the next time we meet, we are going to make that happen to talk about this. Village life is a very simple one. Very, very simple, close to nature. People live there, very, very simple way of life. People gather at forums like this. This is not different from what we saw during the earlier presentation. Huts, and then for decision making, the elders will meet to make decisions about their community. The predominant activity there we know is farming, mostly food crop farming and cash crop farming. And sometimes, people will meet, and then the type of farming that we know is labor intensive. We hair load stuff, we work for miles and miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, to the farms and back. Even though it's changing now, some communities are becoming more progressive. So instead of walking, they have access to rural transportation. But we're talking about communications. And we also know that because of the impact of technology, which is affecting all areas, the rural areas are also changing. So it's not uncommon to see scenes like this. And of course, mobile is king, as we know. It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And even within the rural environment, almost everybody has access to a cell phone. And we're also talking about rural telecommunications. It's also not uncommon for people to live in a hut like this and have a satellite dish in front of that facility. This is rare. Okay, so that is rural life. This thing is, I don't know what is happening. Okay, if you have ever lived in a rural area, you realize that, and here I'm looking at communication in a very broad sense. The way people communicate at the rural level, we have traditional and non-traditional ways of communication. This is not new, so I'm not going to waste too much time. And this is how they receive information and all that. Communication is key. In a rural area, we realize that with the advent of technology, people use communication to achieve all kinds of outcomes, within the rural environment. And these are all the various ways. And again, because I have a very limited time, I'm not gonna, go through that. There's nothing new, about this. We all know about the different ways and the importance of communication. Is not only in the rural environment, same, we can say the same in urban environments as well. I don't know why this thing is being, okay. There are a bunch of challenges within the rural environment. We know that why is it that it's so difficult to have access to communication? Again, we know that because of the cost of investment, it's very difficult to get providers to locate or to provide service. So absence of providers or limited providers. My area is a very good example. We have 6 mobile providers. There's only one who has service, and the service is not the best. Yes, voice is available, but data is a challenge. So internet access becomes a challenge. We know the infrastructure is not well developed. Again, this is not new. We all know that. Literacy level is low in rural environments. So sometimes, even though the service may exist, but people may not be aware, or the numerous users of the service may not be very visible to people who live in that area. There's poor media reach. We know that. The rural area is vast. We saw that in the earlier presentation. So sometimes it makes it very difficult to provide the service. Sometimes because of multiple languages and stuff, even though Ghana, it may not be a major challenge, but we know in some parts of the world, in rural communities, the language becomes an issue. Poverty. The bottom line is poverty. You have to pay for these services, and we know in the rural environment, resources are scarce. People, don't have a lot of money to spend. There are multiple needs and all that. So it becomes a challenge. How do you sustain these services within the rural environment? So sustainability becomes an issue. And then incomes are low within the rural environment. I hope it will work this time. Good. These are just global examples. We know there are all kinds of projects to try to deal with the rural communication challenge. And these are not new. I know I'm preaching to the converted, so I don't have to talk for that. The first is the Grameen Bank village. We know it started in Bangladesh. They started with mobile telephones. They move on to other services as well. The telecenter concept, it used to be very, very popular about 10 years ago, where a one-stop facility will be provided in a rural environment. People will have access to telephony services, faxing services, and all that. And I know there were some pilot projects in selected countries in Africa. We don't know if those 5 centers still run. I know there was one in Uganda, there was one in South Africa, 1 or 2 in Eastern Africa, and all that. So all these are pilot projects. The NLOG multi-tier franchise model is also an approach used by the Indian government to provide access to telecommunication services to people living in rural India. GIFEC, we know the CIC model, community information centers, where most areas, I don't know how many we have now, but it's all over the country, where it's a one-stop facility, and then people can have access to computers and connectivity. And I know some of them are very, very active. Mobile money, my earlier speaker talked about that in rural areas, in most parts of Africa. These are just examples. The most popular one that we know is the M-Pesa in Kenya. And I know in Ghana too, we have all kinds of mobile money services by the telcos. Funding of low-cost devices with computing and communication capabilities in India. This is a project again by the Indian government. The goal is to try to provide rural people with access to communications. In this case, moving beyond, voice and telephony services to data services where low-cost devices are provided in the form of affordable tablets. Now, we are way behind when it comes to initiating policies to connect rural areas so that we can catch up with other parts of the world. What do we need to do? We really need to run, we need to gallop, we need to leapfrog to make sure that at least some of these services are brought to rural areas. We cannot talk about rural connectivity without talking about universal access and universal service, and I know these days is universal access and service, where the initial emphasis has been on universal access, and then now is universal access and services. So we're looking at going beyond telephony services and data services and all that. So that is the basis, of all that. What are some of the policy and regulatory issues? I know in earlier presentation the licensing issue, came up, and again, most people are of the view that because of the slow process, and this is just an example in a country where some measures have been taken to fast track, that process. Communication infrastructure, my CTO colleague mentioned that is also a challenge. And one big issue, especially in Ghana, is the lack of a strong consumer protection regulation. So consumers are at the mercy, of the telco providers. Sometimes they advertise, they promise that this is what we do, but in reality, it is not what is being delivered. Who is there to speak on behalf of consumers? So it becomes an issue. SMS pricing, I know it varies from telco to telco, is also one of the issues. We know that the role of the public sector has changed. We know in the early 1990s, the emphasis were on state monopolies, but because of deregulation and privatization and all that, the model has now shifted where, the private sector is now more involved in the delivery, and the role of the public sector, has changed. Taxes on communication services is also one of the issues that we need to, address. Which direction should we go? Radio is still a very potent force when it comes to rural communications. And I know especially in Ghana, all over we have, these radio stations. But here we're talking about community radio to be used when it comes to rural development and access. Wireless communications, a bunch of them. Microwaves, TV white space, name it, that could be used to provide rural access. Some people have advocated for the creation of rural information technology administration to be under the local government ministry, so that there's a whole ministry dedicated to rural communication issues. There's also talk about rural utility services. It's not only communication. There are, electricity power issues, there's water issues, and name it. Rural Services Commission is also one of the, the people have proposed that if there is a Rural Services Commission, again, the focus is on services in rural areas. There's one model called Participatory Development Communication Model. All what it means is that in developing projects to affect the lives of rural people, involve rural people in a process. That is all what it means. All this write-up, I'm not going to spend time to, and then there are all kinds of techniques. Today we know that, especially in the rural areas, because of social media technology, especially WhatsApp, almost everybody is using, that. So, communication actually improved. Now, we need to be bold when it comes to enacting policies to deal with the challenges, in the rural areas. If we are not bold, we pay lip service. We talk about, rural communication and all that, but what are we actually doing? Since the days of Father Abraham, we've been pushing about rural communications. Today, in most rural areas, outside the major cities, internet access, data services become an issue. Let's walk the talk. So whatever we say we're doing, let us be bold. The cat is bold, to be in front of all those wild dogs. So let's move in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Osei Darkwa. Now I introduce the fourth gentleman up on the third gentleman up on the podium, but he doesn't have a presentation, but I suppose that considering the organization he represents, he might help to provide some clarity to some of your questions and on the subject that we're discussing. So we have Mr. Michael Ajay Techi from the Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communications, and he's the project and programs director, correct? Manager. And Mr. Mike Ajay Techi has an MSc in telematics from the University of Havana, or Habana as they call it, Havana in Cuba. BSc in telecommunications and electronics, and is a certified project manager. He's got 10 years experience in the telecom industry with special emphasis on universal access. So he's very well positioned here to address our questions. So I'm going to open the floor, but I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask myself. So while you clear your throat, maybe I can raise a couple of questions here. Perhaps I should start with you, Mike, because you haven't spoken. So what do you glean from the presentations that you have heard this afternoon, particularly from Dr. Barrantes and the case studies from Central America, from Peru and Chile, yes.
Yeah, I think it has been very, very educative. But one thing I can say, I have to clarify before we continue is, GIFEC, we don't use the word rural. Not because we can't pronounce it well, but it's because rural is a little bit, definition that always brings trouble. So we call it underserved and unserved communities. Because there's a community middle of Accra, unserved, but we go to Yendi to go and work because we think it's rural. So always we try to really differentiate the two ways so that we'll be at the right position. One thing I can say about the doctor's presentation is, before GIFEC was set up, I think a lot of work was done and they did a good work. Because the model that he presented of Chile and Peru is a combination that GIFEC is using. We are using the 10%, 1% from the operators, and the law gives us opportunity for Treasury to add something to it. Of course, they've not done it, but I hope they will do it. But now the way they use the money for broadband infrastructure, the same way we are doing now, as we are talking about, is that we use most of our fund for broadband infrastructure and then voice and data. So putting those things together, I think that's what I pick as at now, but if there's anything at all, we can talk about it during the discussion. Thank you.
I've got a question for Noshad. You talked in one of your slides about competition in rural ICT sector. Yeah. How? I mean, when the issue is about commercial viability, how do you promote competition when no one finds it attractive to start with?
Sure. Looking at the market in terms of underserved market, not many companies would come forward to compete for the obvious reasons, means there is no profitability and immediate return. But still there are companies who are catering to this market. I think the most important thing is to look at market share and not profitability. In these sort of markets, you cannot expect an immediate return or expect a return as quick as the urban market is. I can foresee increase in mobile broadband penetration the last 5 years in Ghana has been immense. has been one of the leading, I would say, in West African countries. But if you cascade it further down towards underserved market segments, there are very few companies like VNL and KNet. There are a few companies who are looking at trying to bring cost-effective solutions to serve such communities, because I believe that internet is not a want, it's a need. And it's very important that everybody has access to the internet. And it's very important that one and all has access to it. So it's quite critical for companies who are looking at investing or who are looking at providing their solutions to such markets to think of long-term market share and not short-term profitability.
Okay. Wonder what you think. A quick question for Dr. Barrantes. Would you recommend, or indeed any one of you, domestic roaming?
Thank you. I will answer with a question. Why not? It's like, yeah, I know the problem is facilities-based competition versus other types of competition. When the country lacks infrastructure, it's better to provide incentives for firms to expand infrastructure and then worry about the roaming. But on the other hand, being an economist is always handy when it comes to the opposite position. The issue is the consumer. We need to be communicated. We cannot wait for the for the operators to be finding the profitability in order to expand the infrastructure. So I think I go again with my first answer. Why not?
So I'm going to open the floor now for your thoughts. Oh, your mic is still open. Thank you. So the floor is open for questions or comments, please. Yes, please identify yourself, say your name and where you're from, organization, country. There's a mic coming up. No. Is underserved. It's yes.
I don't have a Midas touch when it comes to technology, clearly. My name is Scott Minahan. I debated about raising a question or making a comment, but I think given the importance of this for Ghana, I thought I would. What I thought is a couple of the presentations were very traditional. What I think is happening globally in relation to universal service is it's being disrupted. And now there's a big debate about whether universal service funds are the right way to go. If you look globally, there's currently 17.5 billion US dollars currently in universal service funds around the world. It is not being used for universal service. And many funds, either you can't get the money out or they're not put to the purpose to which they were originally intended. So what we're seeing is exactly one of your questions about some innovative approaches. Thinking about domestic roaming, thinking about infrastructure sharing, thinking about ways that we can provide that service in a lot better manner. And I think that's really the challenge. I would contest some of the things that I've heard. I don't, in US dollar terms, there's never been a cheaper time to roll out rural services, right? And I make that point. It's the technology for LTE and for other infrastructure is cheaper now than what it's ever been. So the challenge now is how do we make those models work? And I think some more innovative thinking should happen in Ghana and should happen in other markets, because just setting up a fund, taxing of that approach hasn't worked. It hasn't worked in many markets, and it may or may not work here. So to have a real debate, I thought I'd just talk about, you know, some of those countries that have done well. And I was last week in China. They've done very well in coordinating. So when you have an electricity provider, when you have a other part of government going into a region, you communicate that with the telecoms companies so that you get integrated development. The biggest cost is things like rolling out diesel generators, security for that platform, all of those things. And if you can do it in an integrated fashion, your CapEx cost and OpEx cost is a lot lower. So I think they're the sort of things that we do. It's about planning. It's about integrating. It's about having a national plan. And I think that might be something to think about. Thank you.
I've got a follow-up question for you, sir. Just 1 second. So you said that there's all this money, 17 billion in universal service funds that's sitting idle, unused, or not used for the right purpose. Why? Why so much money sitting idle when we're having this debate, when they're asking this question, when there are all these people that have a right to telecom services but are not getting it, or if they are getting it, they're getting it at a price they can hardly afford?
Okay.
Why is all that money sitting there?
Okay, well, I think there's a GSMA consultancy that did the analysis, I think about 18 months, 2 years ago. It's available online. Have a look at that. It did an assessment of why. That number's gone up, and a lot of it has to do, once the money's in the fund, it becomes very difficult for regulators to assess on how it should come out. You've got to follow probity. You've got to follow due process. It's a very difficult type of process. And so I think some regulators like having a lot of money in their fund. They see it as a great thing, when what it should be is about trying to get the money in and then executing it the most efficient way possible to deliver the services. So I think there's a view that perhaps that's better done in partnership with operators. Either by allocating an area where one operator is responsible for it, you have domestic roaming into that area for a certain period of time, you think about infrastructure sharing, you think about sharing the cost of a backbone, all of those things. So I'd recommend the GSMA paper. It's about 18 months, 2 years old now, but the latest figure of 17.5 is from an ITU presentation from last week. So it's still being tracked.
Thank you very much.
Maybe I can say something?
Absolutely.
Regarding this issue, just sharing the experience of Costa Rica and in some aspects in Peru. In Costa Rica, the monies are being used hand in hand with the execution and implementation of social policies. And so you have targeting families that are specifically targeted for receiving aid from the government. And that includes connectivity. And that includes a bonus in order to pay the regular bandwidth service. But it's hand in hand. Money is being used hand in hand with social policies. And so the need for policy coordination doesn't go only to the other arms of the telecom sector, but also in other areas of the executive.
Yeah, I think you mentioned about some 17 million locked somewhere.
No, billion.
Billion. I wish we had even one of them here. Our money is exhausted. We are doing projects every day. The idea that you are bringing, we are doing that already. So I hope that the research will pay attention to Ghana and then give us some award for that.
Actually, Michael, he's not talking about money that he has. Universal access funds globally, money such as those that are paid to you that have not been either used or not been applied to the right purpose. So cumulatively, globally, it's 17 billion. That's what he's talking about. Okay. There's a gentleman. He's more than just a gentleman. He's Mr. Joshua Pepra, who's for many years was a fixture in the telecommunications regulatory environment. I think we'll be more efficient if you just walk up to the podium. We'll hear you quicker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the introduction. And also the question that you asked the gentleman over there, why? I think there's a big disconnect between the original purposes and ideas that went in to set up the GIFEC, or back then it was GIFTEL, policies here in Ghana. I'm talking about Ghana now. There's a disconnect between the National Communications Authority of what GIFEC is doing, what the larger population really wants, and what the operators are prepared to do. So I think we need to look at 20 years hence, 20 years after privatization and deregulation and everything, we need to look at what is good for Ghana. The amount of money keeps coming. The 1% keeps coming. So, like he said, it's difficult for the agency to say stop. But is it being used for the needs of the industry as we see it now? Things have changed, and we really need to have a conversation about how to really penetrate the unserved areas with the monies that are collected from the operators, and the type of regulations and policies and strategies from the National Communications Authority that will also help to advance this cause. It's a big milieu. I mean, if you look at the GIFEC constitution, all the operators sit on it. The Director General from the NCA participates in their decision making. But for all the years that I was at the NCA, hardly did I get any feedback from what GIFEC was doing and how it impacts on what we are supposed to do. So the money comes and a lot of projects are initiated and they are being rolled out. Projects that you have to ask yourself, who wants it? Who can better execute these projects? How do the telcos themselves, how are they actually even executing those projects or meeting those needs? So I think we need to step back, look at the need for broadband, the need for internet access everywhere, the need for power, to go to these areas and really look at the quantum of funds that are coming and really have a plan on how to use all these monies and what kind of frequencies can even be reserved for these areas. Because some frequencies are jammed here in the capital cities, but if you moved out of the capital cities, they can be available and be used free. But, you know, there's very little connection. And we need to step back. I'm not blaming anybody. I mean, technology has run off since inception of NCA and deregulation and everything. But now we need to step back and see, what do we have? What do the people want? It used to be a payphone booth was just sufficient. Now it's not. You need some internet, but it's not just internet. You need broadband. You need broadband. You need power that will power up these broadband base stations. So it's a mixture. And just throwing money at the agency and letting the agency just come up with buying computers for some training school here, there, that sort of thing, really won't work anymore. I think we've come far. We really need to sit down and break this thing up and have a discussion. That is the only way we can help the ICT industry going forward. Ourselves here in the cities and even also in the underserved areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joshua Pipra, who used to head regulatory. There are quite a number of hands up, but I'm being told that I'm run out of time. I will take two. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Martin Koyabe, and I work for the CTO. I just wanted to make a point that has been raised, and more particularly to comment on what my colleague Nushat presented. Within the last 4 years or so, we've been developing broadband strategies for different countries. And we've learned that when you take countries, let's say the small island states, the experience in those particular countries in terms of broadband strategy is different in the sense that they don't have the numbers that would support some of the areas that we're looking at, especially when you're talking of competition. Likewise, when you shift and you take a large country with a large population, then you discover that there are different ways of how you can approach that. So let me just touch on 3 things that have been raised. So one was the issue of Universal Service Fund. And when we advise and talk to some of the countries that we've dealt with, we've always articulated the fact that they should have an agile approach to the Universal Service Fund that, as the previous speaker said, should be able to be reactive to what is actually currently happening. So a good example that I can give here is the Malaysian Communication and Multimedia Commission, whereby they know that they have enough expansion in terms of infrastructure, but what they do is that they give a rebate to operators so that they can be able to actually supply devices to the population. Now that is one way you use the Universal Service Fund, but in a creative way. So I think the key is for regulators to actually look at how this Universal Service Fund is being used and to sort of like readjust in a more innovative way of how you can do that. The other point that was raised was domestic roaming, and I support the fact that, and you're right, as Chairman, as you said, there could be some domestic roaming that we can have. And there are examples whereby in East African region, all the 4 or the 5 states in East Africa have agreed to have a universal roaming across their nations. So I think the universal roaming can be agreed across regulators depending on the need and depending on the model. In terms of rural communication and incentives, there are cases whereby you could give operators an incentive, a tax rebate, or something in there to give them an incentive so that they can lower the prices that they're giving to the rural communities. That's all what I wanted to say. Thank you.
The question about roaming was about domestic roaming.
That's right.
But of course, in East Africa, we are talking about the East African community that is international roaming of an international regional nature.
The point that they have and what they're bringing up is that it is value to their citizens. So it's an agreement across the board. And I think telcos buy into that because they look at the numbers, they look at their profit margins, and they're likely to buy into it. So that's what I just wanted to say. Thank you.
Very much. So something for ECOWAS and WATRA to look at. Yes, sir.
I'm called Akasawa Clement Anavire. I'm working with the NCA. Before I contribute, I want to go back to the sociological aspect of the rural community. My senior comrade is talking about, they are talking about underserved. But I think that we should be using rural community in the context in which I'm coming from. Because rural communities are communities that lack good things of life. And we all know good things of life. Because if you say underserved community, definitely if you are from Nima, I'm giving an example. Nima is an underserved community, but they can easily get transport. They can easily make a call. But if you are from Manville, Gori in Upper East region, you can't make a call. If you want to go to the nearest town, you either go with a donkey cart or you go with a motor king. So you can't say underserved communities are the same as in our context that we are talking about communication. Now, I want to find out, after having listened to so many speakers, I realized that communication or ICT is having a positive correlation to national development, because gross domestic product grows if there is penetration of communication facilities in that particular country. But it looks like in Ghana, those who are providing the telecommunication services, their corporate and social responsibilities are only gearing towards doing some emolument, like building a school or presenting a computer to a village school that is not having light to power that computer. What would they use a computer for when they cannot have light to power that? And when there's no even network to use the data that we have talked about. So my suggestion will be, even apart from that, I'm realizing that even the people that you want to serve do not even understand the services that you are providing. For example, data. How many rural communities, the people in the rural communities understand that there's so much data, information somewhere that they can access? We don't even talk about the affordability, but how to use it. It may be available, but if you're not able to access it, it means that it is not there. So I think the policies that maybe governments need to put in place is to ensure that even the people at the rural area even understand that we have this data that can be of benefit to the development of such communities. But I'm in Ghana. I'm realizing that those who are providing the communication services are much interested in the profitability of the services that they provide, but not the socio-economic impact that those services will give to the people in the rural area. That in the cities, the people are running, or they're even flying, while in the rural area, they are crawling. When can that gap be closed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Unfortunately, I've run out of time and I have to bring this session to a close. I'm sure there are questions that many of you still do have. Perhaps in the networking opportunities, we can have further conversations amongst ourselves, and hopefully the organizers, that's the NCA, and can in terms of the output and the outcome of this session, I'm sure that some positive decisions will be made, taking into consideration the contributions that have been made by my excellent panel here and the contributions from the floor as well. And so thank you very much, Dr. Barrantes, Mr. Yehia, Noshad Yehia, Dr. Osei Darkwa, and Mr. Michael Ajay Techi. Thank you.
Yeah, let's put our hands together for Mr. Addo and his panel. Thank you very much. So we have coffee break outside, and we'll come back for the last session for the day. But before we go, I'm reminding us of the Kakum the trip to Cape
And
Coast
our own website
Wednesday.
www.nca.org.gh. Over to the email I call info@nca.org.gh.
to Cape Coast for free.
The Ruboing, as we share the one some so Digital Broadcasting Migration Committee and the Ministry of Communications, the Daruma and the Brem.
And it is maybe the earlier session was talking about consumer information. We need to inform you so that you are not surprised.
Digital Morgano
for Kakum National
Ghana Eco Digital.
There's
hey, Ghana Eco Digital.
International Telecommunications Union ITU. Ashe Omembia Ashe ITU. So we free analog and digital broadcasting.
Say 50.
Ghana Africa ITU. Intimo say this so.
15.
At the top 50 say one massage say.
Ani TV and set top box. As what I said, digital ashes to jabo home. And now be some put TV no. No one show baby a digital ashes to jabo box. Who TV that da. And function for digital set top box. Digital ashes to jabo home. Ubinya frequency bia ope.
And 40 CD for foreigners. So 40 CD is like.
Na digital broadcasting you cry. As so fast one
is just for your information.
Yay!
Thank you very much.
Come on. In the deal, we the whole coding. More cry, I could feel
interesting session. I could see some comments.
Program Bia, a real digital song, which me I get. Wakasa program, and what is our pay? Yanko for Hobiam, there will be for a program. I get digital or Ghana, open once more tia. Yes, so now this is your home mouth free analog code digital broadcast. And they say, Uber National Communication Authority. It was 0302 776621. And now 0302 771701. And our own website www.nca.org.gh. Over to the email I call info@nca.org.gh. The Ruboing, as we share the one some so Digital Broadcasting Migration Committee and the Ministry of Communications, the Daruma and the Brem.
Hello people, how are you doing? I have news for you. Did you know that Ghana is migrating from analog to digital? I am so excited. My name is Anhofe. I am ready. What about you?
Digitime in Ghana.
This is brought to you by Ministry of Communications, Digital Broadcasting Migration Committee, and National Communications Authority.
What is here? What is here? This is the new story time. Once upon a time. Oh, respond.
Time.
Hey. No, not that. Now you call and I will respond. Okay. Yes.
Once upon a time.
It's Digi time in Ghana.
Hey.
Okay.
One waka for
confused. I am Ghana man.
Beautiful. Your friend in the name. Menso me de safua.
Anota fully. Nyankonye Isaac. Achomi Ganyobi Saka.
Okay. One more time. I am Ghana man, and I'm here to explain to you what is digital broadcasting.
Why all this digital what?
It's all about digital terrestrial television migration. DTT for short.
You know what? Can you explain yourself?